Now, here I am. Here I am, a Democrat, and I think I ran the whole gamut. I met with Secretary Noem, and I've always treated her with respect. I met with her in my office, and I refuse and I never will engage on the kinds of sexist kinds of terms like ICE Barbie from a lot of the left media will use those kind of things.
The Secretary of Homeland Security is the person charged with protecting the American people and upholding the laws of this nation. But what happens when the person in that office does not understand the most basic tenets of the United States Constitution? What happens when that secretary identifies the fundamental right of every citizen as a tool for their own power? Tonight, we examine the evidence of a secretary who believes she is above the law and a senator who says she is failing her mission. This is a forensic look at the incompetence of Kristi Noem. Here, play this clip.
So this might be a little off topic with some of the questions that have been brought here, but how many billions did the big beautiful bill allow or amount for ICE effectively?
So we're about 75 billion.
Yeah, I mean, AI just called up, says that it's 75 billion, right? Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Kristi Noem, the Secretary of Homeland Security, has made a claim that strikes at the very heart of American liberty. She has claimed that the legal principle of habeas corpus is a power granted to the President of the United States to remove people from this country at will. That is a lie. It is a dangerous constitutional falsehood that reveals a profound ignorance of the law she is sworn to enforce. This lie is not a mere slip of the tongue. It is a declaration of authoritarian intent that contradicts the plain text of the United States Constitution. Here, play this clip.
Components, sir?
Yeah. No. How many other operations, departments are in DHS? Like Coast Guard?
Coast Guard, okay. FEMA, CBP.
FEMA. Okay.
CISA, which is
CISA, like cybersecurity.
Yes, sir.
I mean, that's kind of important, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, then that would shut down.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And now another one also, TSA.
TSA is under DHS.
That's another one. Okay, so
The Secretary's misunderstanding of the law is accompanied by a record of administrative incompetence and a disregard for factual evidence. Under her leadership, the Department of Homeland Security has drifted away from its core mission of public safety and toward a model of political theater. This theater is designed to project strength through optics rather than through the competent execution of legal authority. The consequences of this failure are measured in the loss of human life and the systematic violation of constitutional rights. Here, play this clip.
The public unsafe, it makes the agents unsafe, and it makes, and I think they've lost the plot if they're focusing on these kinds of theater. We're not focusing on securing our border and deporting and targeting criminals and that. So as a pro-border, pro-deport all the criminals, now, like, what's the answer now moving forward if I think the vast majority of Americans signed up for those things, I think. So, can we want to focus more on those two things that I think so.
We must judge the secretary not by her rhetoric, but by the evidence of her actions and her own testimony before the United States Senate. The evidence proves that she does not possess the legal knowledge required for her office. It proves that she uses the power of her office to mischaracterize fatal encounters with federal agents. It also proves that she is willing to ignore the institutional stability of her department to serve a political narrative. This is a judgment of fitness based on the documented record of her performance. During a hearing before the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee in May, Senator Maggie Hassan of New Hampshire asked Secretary Noem a direct question. She asked the secretary to define the concept of habeas corpus. Secretary Noem replied that habeas corpus is the president's constitutional right to remove people from the country. This is the exact claim made by the highest-ranking official in the Department of Homeland Security. By defining a protection for the individual as a weapon for the executive, Secretary Noem has fundamentally misrepresented the legal foundation of the American justice system. The lie was compounded when Senator Hassan pressed for clarification. Hassan asked the secretary if she supported the fundamental protection that the government must provide a public justification for detaining or imprisoning someone. Noem replied that she did, but she immediately added a second falsehood. She stated that she recognized the President of the United States has the authority under the Constitution to decide whether or not habeas corpus should be suspended. This definition is a complete inversion of American law. It suggests that the right to remain free from arbitrary detention is a privilege that the president can revoke at his own discretion. This lie serves to normalize the idea of unchecked executive power over the lives and liberties of anyone within the borders of the United States. It is a message that the administration is exploring ways to end due process protections entirely. Here, play this clip.
Okay, finally, I have effectively about a minute left, so I just want to reiterate. So, within the next 2 hours, DHS is going to be effectively to path to shut down. And I want to remind everybody that ICE has plenty of money, and that vote to shut DHS down will have no functional impact on ICE because they have that $75 million from the big, beautiful bill. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. I cede. I return.
All right.
The evidence of this constitutional illiteracy is recorded in the official transcripts of the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee. When Senator Hassan informed the secretary that the Constitution actually prohibits the suspension of habeas corpus unless there is a case of rebellion or invasion, Noem had no factual rebuttal. The law, specifically Article 1, Section 9, clarifies that the suspension clause grants the power of suspension to Congress, not the president. Senator Hassan had to inform the secretary of this basic fact on the record. Further evidence of Noem's approach to her office is found in her public messaging and travel. In March 2025, Secretary Noem traveled to El Salvador. She filmed a message from a mega prison known as the Terrorist Confinement Center, or CCOT. She stood in front of deported prisoners and told the camera that if people come to the United States illegally, this is a consequence they could face. During this recording, she prominently displayed an 18-karat gold Rolex Cosmograph Daytona with an estimated value of $50,000. Observers characterized this display as a combination of clumsiness and arrogance. Evidence of her performance also includes her handling of the deaths of Renee Good and Alex Pretty in Minneapolis. Both individuals were shot by federal immigration authorities. Noem claimed that Alex Pretty brandished a gun and attacked federal agents. She referred to his actions as domestic terrorism. However, forensic evidence in the form of incident footage does not show Pretty brandishing a gun. This contradiction suggests a pattern of making false claims to justify the use of lethal force. Regarding the funding of her department, Senator John Fetterman has provided evidence that Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, is not financially restricted. Fetterman noted that ICE has approximately $75 billion in funding from the Big Beautiful Bill signed by Donald Trump. He established that even if the Department of Homeland Security were to shut down, it would have no meaningful functional impact on ICE operations. A shutdown would instead punish the Coast Guard, FEMA, TSA, and the Cybersecurity Agency. This proves that Noem's warnings about a funding stalemate are targeted at optics rather than the operational capacity of her enforcement agents. Noem's public persona has been marked by a glamorous but militarized image. She posted a video from the streets of New York while wearing a Border Patrol uniform, a bulletproof vest, and heavy makeup. In that video, she referred to people on the streets as filthy people. This behavior led to the media nickname Ice Barbie, a term that has sparked significant debate regarding sexism and political discourse. The forensic evidence shows a secretary who prioritizes her physical presentation and militaristic branding over legal accuracy. The record of her background also provides evidence of her decision-making style. In her own book, Noem described killing her 14-month-old dog, Cricket. She claimed the dog had an aggressive personality and was untrainable. She recounted stopping to chat with a family on the way back from a hunt, during which the dog escaped and killed the family's chickens. Noem says she hated the dog and realized she had to put her down. She shot the dog in a gravel pit, describing the act as difficult, messy, and ugly, but something that simply needed to be done. This narrative was intended to project a willingness to make tough decisions, but it serves as evidence of a reliance on lethal force as a primary solution for perceived problems. Finally, the evidence of judicial oversight shows that the department under Noem is failing to respect constitutional boundaries. A Trump-appointed judge has already ruled that ICE violated the constitutional rights of detainees in Minnesota. This judicial ruling serves as forensic proof that the agency under Noem's leadership is operating outside the law. The mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey, has also announced that the city is suing the administration over stripped constitutional rights. The mounting legal evidence points to a systematic failure to uphold the rights Noem claims to understand, but clearly does not. Secretary Noem's use of the term domestic terrorism to describe the actions of Alex Priddy is a primary tool for control. By labeling a fatal encounter as terrorism before the facts are established, the secretary exercises the power to frame the narrative. This rhetoric is designed to justify the use of lethal force by federal agents and to silence dissent from the public or the media. It transforms a police shooting into a matter of national security, thereby bypassing the usual scrutiny applied to law enforcement. Her definition of habeas corpus as a presidential right is the ultimate assertion of executive control. It attempts to transform a constitutional shield for the citizen into a sword for the president. This interpretation suggests that the executive branch has the power to detain and remove individuals without any judicial oversight or public justification. This is an attempt to exert absolute control over the immigrant population and anyone the administration deems a threat to public safety. The display of wealth in a Salvadoran prison and the use of militarized fashion in New York City are further exercises in power projection. These actions are designed to project an image of unconditional loyalty to the president and an aggressive personality willing to do the messy and ugly work of the administration. This is about the optics of strength rather than the substance of legal or operational competence. The secretary's rhetoric regarding the DHS budget also serves a control function. By warning that a funding stalemate endangers TSA, FEMA, and the Coast Guard, she attempts to pressure Congress into compliance. However, by simultaneously ensuring that ICE remains fully funded with $75 billion, she maintains her primary tool for enforcement, regardless of the status of other critical government agencies. This allows her to exert power through enforcement while using the rest of her department as a political hostage. The strongest defense for Secretary Noem is that she is a dedicated leader focused on the core mission of securing the border and protecting the nation from criminals. She argues that the previous administration left the border in a state of disaster and that aggressive action is required to restore order. Her supporters claim that critics are merely using sexist terms like ICE Barbie to belittle a strong woman who is doing the difficult work of deportation. This defense is dismantled by the facts of her own performance and the criticism from within her own political sphere. Senator John Fetterman, a Democrat who has expressed a desire to work with her and support securing the border, has labeled her as grossly incompetent. Fetterman points out that under Noem's leadership, ICE and Border Patrol are no longer focused on their core mission of deporting criminals. He argues that she is betraying DHS's core mission and trashing the border security legacy. Furthermore, the defense of her border security focus is undermined by her own testimony regarding the DHS budget. She warns of the dangers of a shutdown to TSA and FEMA, yet she remains part of an administration that has seen its own allies vote against the very funding bills that would support these agencies. The $75 billion already allocated to ICE proves that the funding crisis she cites is selective and does not impact her preferred enforcement arm. The argument that criticism of her is purely sexist is also dismantled by the substance of the critiques. While some on the left have used the ICE Barbie nickname, the most damaging critiques have come from her own sworn testimony and the judicial rulings against her agency. Senator Hassan's correction of her constitutional errors had nothing to do with her appearance and everything to do with her legal ignorance. The defense that she is a strong woman cannot mask the fact that she does not understand the Constitution she is sworn to uphold. To understand the gravity of Secretary Noem's claims, one must understand the purpose of habeas corpus. In plain English, it is the right of an individual to challenge their detention in court. It requires the government to bring a prisoner before a judge and provide a legal justification for holding them. It is a fundamental protection that separates a free society from a police state. The United States Constitution addresses this in Article 1, Section 9, which contains the suspension clause. This clause explicitly states that the privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended unless when in cases of rebellion or invasion, the public safety may require it. Legal precedent and the structure of the Constitution place the power to suspend this right in the hands of Congress, not the president. Secretary Noem's assertion that it is a presidential right to remove people is a total inversion of this legal principle. Furthermore, her claim that the president can decide whether or not it should be suspended is a direct contradiction of the suspension clause. The law is quite restrictive and allows for suspension only in exceptional circumstances, like rebellion or invasion. The president cannot suspend that recourse on his own authority. Understanding these distinctions is essential for any official in charge of national security. Based on the evidence, Secretary Noem has demonstrated a level of professional incompetence that makes her unfit for the office she holds. Her failure to understand the Constitution is not a minor error. It is a disqualifying lack of knowledge for the person overseeing the nation's domestic security and legal enforcement of immigration. She has shown a consistent pattern of prioritizing political theater over factual accuracy. Her personal history further illustrates a troubling pattern of judgment. In her own book, Noem described killing her 14-month-old dog because the animal was untrainable and dangerous. She characterized the act of shooting the dog as something that simply needed to be done, despite describing the animal as the picture of pure joy only moments before. This narrative was intended to project a willingness to make tough decisions, but it instead signaled to many a lack of empathy and a reliance on lethal force as a first resort. This same pattern is now visible in her handling of federal enforcement actions. Her willingness to label the death of Alex Priddy as domestic terrorism without supporting evidence mirrors her decision to label her dog as dangerous before shooting it. In both cases, she uses labels to justify the use of force and to frame her actions as a necessary, if messy, duty. This is not the judgment required for a Secretary of Homeland Security. It is the judgment of an official who views the law as an obstacle rather than a mandate. The expert authority on this matter includes Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, who sits on the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee. Fetterman has directly appealed for Noem to be fired, citing her incompetence and her betrayal of the DHS mission. He has compared her performance unfavorably to former Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, stating that Americans are dying under her watch. Senator Maggie Hassan, also a member of the committee, provides the legal authority on the Constitution. She corrected Noem's false claims about habeas corpus and the suspension clause during official testimony. Her questions established the Secretary's fundamental lack of legal understanding on the record. The mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey, has also taken a stand, announcing that the city is suing the administration over stripped constitutional rights following federal immigration operations. Frey represents the institutional voice of a city directly impacted by the Secretary's enforcement policies. Finally, a Trump-appointed judge has already provided judicial confirmation of the failures occurring under Noem's leadership. The judge ruled that ICE violated the constitutional rights of detainees in Minnesota, a direct rebuttal to the Secretary's claims of legal and constitutional compliance. These authorities collectively establish a record of legal, political, and administrative failure. The institutions of government are currently attempting to hold Secretary Noem accountable, but they are facing significant resistance. The Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee has used its oversight power to question her on the budget and her legal understanding. These hearings have exposed her incompetence to the public record. The courts have also begun to intervene, as seen in the ruling against ICE in Minnesota. This judicial action is a critical step in holding the agency accountable for violating the constitutional rights of individuals. However, the institutional failure lies in the executive branch's refusal to act on these findings. President Trump has stated he has no plans to replace Secretary Noem, despite the calls for her removal from members of Congress like Senator Fetterman. The Department of Justice has also failed to address the discrepancies between Noem's claims regarding the Minneapolis shootings and the available video footage. There has been no reported investigation into the domestic terrorism label she applied to Alex Priddy. The city of Minneapolis has had to seek accountability through the justice system because federal oversight has failed to address the actions of agents on the ground. This reflects a priority of unconditional loyalty over professional competence within the current administration. The procedural consequences of Secretary Noem's actions are already unfolding in the legal and legislative arenas. The city of Minneapolis is moving forward with its lawsuit against the administration, which will force a discovery process regarding the federal operations that led to the deaths of Renee Good and Alex Priddy. This will likely result in the release of more evidence regarding the conduct of federal agents and the accuracy of the Secretary's public statements. In the Senate, the path to a DHS shutdown continues to be a point of procedural contention. Senator Fetterman was the only Democrat to vote in favor of advancing a full-year funding bill because he opposes shutdowns, but the legislative stalemate persists. The Secretary's rhetoric regarding this stalemate continues to ignore the fact that her primary enforcement agency, ICE, remains fully funded with $75 billion. The most significant consequence may be the continued legal challenges to the administration's immigration policies. As long as the Secretary of Homeland Security maintains that the president has the authority to suspend due process and habeas corpus, every enforcement action taken by her department will be subject to intense constitutional scrutiny. The institutional instability caused by a secretary who does not know the law she is enforcing will likely lead to more judicial interventions and a further breakdown in the core mission of her agency. Secretary Noem's claim that habeas corpus is a tool for presidential removal is a lie. It is a lie that has been exposed by the facts, the law, and the very members of the Senate who oversee her department. The evidence shows a secretary who is more focused on militarized optics and absolute power than on the constitutional limits of her office. The procedural fallout of this incompetence is only just beginning.